The silence before the storm. The courtroom was silent. The weight of the moment pressed down on every soul in the room. Every breath, every heartbeat seemed deafening in the overwhelming quiet. At the center of it all stood Lucy Westbrook, a 15-year-old girl, her hands trembling as she clenched them into fists, her heart hammering in her chest. She had never been the type to seek attention. She had always stayed in the background, unnoticed, unheard. But today it was different. She took a deep breath, her eyes darting between the judge, her mother, and the rows of strangers staring at her, some with pity, some with curiosity, and others with cold, hardened expressions. The truth she was about to reveal would change everything. There was no turning back now. Lucy licked her dry lips, swallowing the lump in her throat. She had thought about this moment for days, agonized over it in the solitude of her bedroom. But now that she was here, standing before all these people, her resolve wavered. Then she saw her mother. Sitting stiffly at the defendant's table, Margaret Westbrook had always been a composed woman. Strong, fierce, elegant. But today, her mask was cracking. Lucy could see the fear flickering in her mother's sharp green eyes. The same eyes that had once looked at Lucy with warmth, now looked at her with a quiet desperation. "Don't do this," those eyes seemed to plead. Lucy clenched her fists tighter, digging her nails into her palm. No more lies. No more secrets. Her voice shook, but it was clear. "You knew," she whispered, then steadied herself, speaking louder. "You knew what happened, and you never told anyone. You hid it from everyone, even from me." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. A shudder of unease passed through the crowd. Her mother's face paled. The judge, an older man with graying hair and a sharp gaze, leaned forward, his fingers laced together as he studied Lucy. "Miss Westbrook, I need you to clarify. What exactly are you saying?" Lucy's breath caught in her throat. This was it. She had spent her entire life questioning, doubting. But now she knew the truth. And she was about to destroy everything. 3 weeks earlier, Lucy sat curled up on her bed, hugging her knees. The rain outside her window tapped against the glass like impatient fingers. Thunder rumbled in the distance, mirroring the storm brewing inside her. Downstairs, the muffled sound of her parents' voices seeped through the walls. They were arguing. Again. Lucy sighed, pressing her hands against her ears. It had become a nightly occurrence. The quiet, simmering tension in their house had reached its boiling point over the past few months. Every conversation between her parents ended in whispers. Every look exchanged was thick with unspoken words. Something was wrong, and she knew it. Then she heard it. A sentence that changed everything. "It's time to tell her, Margaret," her father's voice, David Westbrook, was quiet but firm. A pause. Her mother's response was barely audible, but Lucy could still make it out. "She's too young. She'll never understand." Lucy's breath hitched. Understand what? Her mind spun, searching for an explanation. Her parents were always secretive, but they had never spoken about her like this before. What was it they didn't want her to know? She crawled toward her bedroom door, pressing her ear against the cool wood. "I don't care about that anymore," her father continued, his voice sharper now. "We can't keep this from her forever. She deserves to know the truth." The truth. Lucy's pulse quickened. Whatever they were hiding, it was about her. The discovery. The next day, Lucy walked through her house with a strange sense of detachment. She replayed the conversation over and over in her head. Her father wanted to tell her something. Her mother refused. Why? She didn't have to wonder for long. Her parents had gone out that morning, leaving the house eerily quiet. Lucy had never been one to snoop, but today she felt a tug in her chest. An urge, a need. She moved toward her father's office. The door was locked, as always, but Lucy knew where the spare key was, hidden beneath the third floorboard of the hallway. She had seen her father retrieve it once when he thought no one was watching. Her hands trembled as she slid the wooden plank aside, and found the small brass key beneath it. She hesitated. Was she really about to do this? Yes. She slipped the key into the lock, turning it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing a room untouched by the chaos of the rest of the house. Stacks of paperwork littered her father's desk. Folders, receipts, financial records. Lucy's eyes skimmed the papers. Then, something caught her attention. A sealed envelope addressed to her. Her breath hitched. She grabbed it, her fingers shaking as she tore it open. Inside was a letter, a single, crisp white page covered in her father's familiar handwriting. Her eyes scanned the words quickly, her heart pounding with every line. Lucy, if you're reading this, it means the truth is coming to light sooner than I expected. There is something you need to know, something your mother has been hiding from you. I wanted to tell you myself, but Margaret refused. She thought she was protecting you. But I know better. The past can't be buried forever. Lucy's hands tightened around the paper. Her father had known all along. Her mother had been hiding something. The weight of the revelation settled into her chest, heavy and suffocating. And then she saw the file beneath the letter. She flipped it open, and that's when she saw it. A photograph. Her mother, standing in a dark alley, next to a man she didn't recognize. Her mother's face was turned slightly toward the camera, but the expression she wore, it wasn't the mother Lucy knew. It was cold, detached, afraid. Lucy's fingers tightened around the edges of the photo as a sick feeling settled in her stomach. What had she just uncovered? Whatever it wasn't just a secret. It was a lie, a huge, dangerous lie. And it was only the beginning. The lies that bind. The photograph burned into Lucy's mind long after she had put it back in the folder. The image of her mother standing in that dark alley, looking over her shoulder as if she were being watched, sent a shiver down her spine. Her hands trembled as she reread her father's letter, his words heavy with a truth she hadn't been prepared for. There is something you need to know. Something your mother has been hiding from you. I wanted to tell you myself, but Margaret refused. She thought she was protecting you. But I know better. The past can't be buried forever. Lucy swallowed hard. The past can't be buried forever. She needed to know what that meant. Glancing at the door, she half expected her parents to storm in and catch her red-handed. But the house remained silent. The walls, the furniture, even the air felt different, as if the entire house had been keeping secrets. She turned back to the desk, scanning the documents scattered across the surface. Some were financial records, others were legal papers, but none of them made sense to her. Then she noticed another file tucked beneath a stack of reports. It was labeled with a single name, James Westbrook. Lucy's breath caught. Uncle James. She hesitated, unsure if she was ready to uncover whatever truth was hidden within these pages. But she had already come this far. There was no turning back now. She flipped open the file, and what she saw made her stomach drop. A family betrayal. Inside the folder were more photographs, but these were different. They weren't just of her mother. They were of James. In one, he was shaking hands with a man in a suit, his expression unreadable. In another, he was standing in front of what looked like a warehouse, talking to a group of people whose faces were blurred out. Lucy frowned. Why would her father have these? Then her eyes landed on a newspaper clipping attached to the back of the folder. The headline sent a shockwave through her body. Businessman found dead under mysterious circumstances, suspected ties to criminal syndicate. Her hands tightened around the paper as she skimmed the article. The man in the article, Vincent LaRosa, had been a major player in finance until he was found dead in his office under suspicious circumstances. And the name that kept coming up in the investigation, James Westbrook. Lucy's blood ran cold. Her uncle had been connected to a man who had been killed, and from the way this file had been compiled, her father had known about it. But the question was, why? Her breath hitched as she flipped through the rest of the file. There were bank statements, large transactions moving through different accounts. Some of them traced back to her mother's name. Lucy's pulse quickened. Her mother and her uncle had been involved in something together. But what? She had so many questions, and the only people who could answer them were the very people who had been lying to her. The confrontation. Lucy paced her room for hours, waiting for her parents to come home. The storm outside had grown louder, the wind howling as rain pelted against the windows. By the time she heard the front door open, she had already decided what she was going to do. She was going to confront them. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. She could hear her mother's heels clicking against the wooden floors, followed by the heavy thud of her father's shoes. Lucy inhaled sharply. She stepped out of her room. Her parents turned to her in surprise. "Lucy," her mother said, her voice soft but cautious. "What are you still doing up?" Lucy's heart pounded. Should she do this? Was she ready? No. But she had no choice. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice firm. "Both of you." Her parents exchanged a look. That same look they always shared when something was being left unsaid. Her father sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Lucy, it's late. Can this wait until morning?" "No." She shook her head. "It can't." Her mother stepped forward, her green eyes searching Lucy's face. "Sweetheart, what's wrong?" Lucy clenched her fists. They were still pretending, still acting like nothing was wrong. Fine. If they weren't going to be honest, she would force them to be. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph she had taken from the office. Then she held it up. Her mother's face paled instantly. Her father stiffened. "I found this," Lucy said, her voice barely above a whisper, "in Dad's office." Silence. Then, "Lucy, you shouldn't have been snooping," her father said, his voice suddenly cold. "I wouldn't have had to snoop if you had just told me the truth." She shot back, her voice rising. "What is this? Why do you have a file on Uncle James? Why is Mom in this photo, meeting some strange guy in an alley?" Her mother exhaled sharply, her hands trembling. "I can explain," she started. "Then do it," Lucy snapped. "Because right now, it looks like you've been lying to me my whole life." Her mother flinched. For the first time in her life, Lucy saw guilt in her mother's expression. Her father ran a hand down his face, looking exhausted. "Lucy," he said finally, his voice tight. "It's complicated." "Then make it simple," she shot back. Her father hesitated. Then, after a long moment, he sighed. "We didn't want you to find out this way." Lucy's chest tightened. Find out what? Her father looked at her, really looked at her, as if he were seeing her for the first time. "James isn't who you think he is," he said quietly. Lucy frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means your uncle isn't just some businessman," her father said, his voice tense. "He's been involved in something dangerous, something illegal. And your mother." He paused, glancing at her. "She got caught up in it too." Lucy felt like the air had been sucked out of her lungs. She turned to her mother, her voice shaking. "Mom, is that true?" Margaret Westbrook didn't answer. Her eyes, once filled with strength, now only held fear. That was all the confirmation Lucy needed. She took a step back, her stomach twisting. "Oh my God." "Lucy," her mother said quickly, stepping forward. "It's not what you think. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Lucy snapped, her voice cracking. "You tell me to always do the right thing, but you've been lying to me for years." Her father's jaw tightened. "We were trying to protect you." Lucy let out a bitter laugh. "Protect me? You're protecting yourselves. You lied to me. You lied to everyone." Her mother inhaled sharply, as if the words had physically hurt her. Lucy turned away, her heart pounding. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. She had wanted answers. But now that she had them, she wished she had never asked. Her father's voice was quiet but firm. "Lucy, listen to me. We need to be careful. Your uncle, he's dangerous. And if he finds out, you know." A sudden bang outside made them all freeze. Lucy's heart jumped into her throat. Her father turned toward the window, his expression darkening. He exhaled sharply, then muttered one word under his breath. James. Lucy's blood ran cold. Her uncle was here. And suddenly, she realized. She might have just made the biggest mistake of her life. The shadow at the door. The air inside the Westbrook house turned thick, dense with tension and unspoken fear. Lucy's heart pounded in her chest as the realization settled in. James was outside. Her father was already moving, his steps purposeful and urgent as he headed toward the window. He pulled the curtain aside just enough to see through the rain-streaked glass. His expression darkened. Her mother, usually so composed, had gone rigid. Her hands were clasped so tightly together that her knuckles had turned white. Lucy's breath came in short gasps. Her mind spun. Had James heard them? Did he know that she had uncovered the truth? Was he here for them? She took an instinctive step back. A sharp knock at the front door shattered the silence. Her mother flinched. Her father's shoulders tensed, his entire body coiled like a spring ready to snap. The knock came again. Louder. More insistent. Lucy's stomach churned. Her father exhaled sharply. "Stay here," he muttered before striding toward the door. Lucy didn't stay put. She couldn't. Instead, she followed, her heartbeat thrumming against her ribs. Her father hesitated for only a second before unlocking the door and pulling it open. There he was, James Westbrook, standing in the rain, his trench coat soaked through, but his expression remained unreadable. His eyes flicked past her father and landed directly on Lucy. Her breath hitched. For most of her life, Uncle James had been a mystery, the quiet observer at family gatherings. The man who always seemed to know more than he let on. The one who disappeared for long stretches without explanation. She had never questioned it. Until now. And now she saw him for what he really was. A predator. His lips curled into a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, well," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "What a surprise. It's been a while, hasn't it, Lucy?" Lucy's father took a step forward, his stance protective. "What do you want, James?" James chuckled. "Come on, Dave. That's no way to greet your own brother." "You need to leave," her father said, voice cold. James arched an eyebrow. "Now that's not very hospitable." Then his gaze cut to Lucy again. Her stomach twisted. "I heard you've been doing some digging, Lucy." Lucy's hands clenched at her sides. The way he said her name, like it was a challenge, sent a chill down her spine. Her father's body shifted, moving slightly in front of her. "I said, leave." James sighed dramatically. "I just want to talk." "Talk," her father snapped. "Talk about how you dragged Margaret into your mess. How you've been laundering money through our family. Or maybe about how you think you can just show up here uninvited." James raised a hand. "Relax, Dave. You're making it sound like I'm some kind of monster." A bitter laugh escaped her father's lips. "Aren't you?" James smirked. "That depends on who you ask." Lucy's mother, who had remained silent this entire time, finally spoke. "James," she said softly, almost pleading. "Please, don't do this." James tilted his head. "Don't do what, Margaret?" "Have a civil conversation." His tone dripped with mock innocence. "No," she whispered. "Don't involve Lucy." James exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Margaret, Margaret, Margaret," he tusked, as if disappointed. "You always did let your emotions get the best of you." Lucy's father took a threatening step forward. "If you so much as look at my daughter the wrong way, James, so help me." James raised both hands in surrender, his expression amused. "Easy, Dave. No need for threats. I came here as a courtesy." Her father narrowed his eyes. "Courtesy for what?" James's smirk finally faded. His expression grew dark. "To warn you." A heavy silence fell between them. James took a slow step closer, his voice lowering. "I know what you're thinking, Dave. That you're going to run to the police. That you're going to expose everything. Lucy saw her father's fists tighten. James nodded as if he already knew the answer. You think you have everything figured out, don't you? Lucy didn't realize she was holding her breath until James turned his eyes on her again. You think you found the truth? He asked, voice almost mocking. Let me give you a reality check. Lucy. She swallowed hard. You have no idea how deep this goes. Her pulse stuttered. Her father clenched his jaw. We know enough. James chuckled, but there was no humor in it. No, Dave, you don't. Then his voice dropped even lower, barely above a whisper. But you will. Something about the way he said it made Lucy's skin crawl. James glanced down at his watch, sighing as if suddenly bored. I'd love to stay and chat, but I have places to be. His eyes flicked back to Lucy one last time. I'll see you around, kid. Lucy's breath caught. Then, just like that, James turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness of the storm. Her father slammed the door shut behind him, locking it immediately. No one moved. No one spoke. For the first time in her life, Lucy saw something in her father's expression she had never seen before. Fear. The fallout. Mom. Lucy whispered, turning to her mother. What did he mean by that? Her mother's face had gone pale. She was shaking. He's trying to scare us. Lucy clenched her fists. Is it working? Her mother exhaled shakily but didn't answer. Her father turned to them both, his voice firm. We need to go to the police. Margaret snapped her gaze to him. No. Her father scowled. Margaret. No, Dave, she shouted. You don't understand. If we go to the police, James won't let us live long enough to testify. Her voice cracked. You don't know what he's capable of. Lucy's stomach dropped. He's not just laundering money, is he? Margaret squeezed her eyes shut. Lucy turned to her father, dread curling in her gut. Dad, what else has he done? Her father didn't answer. But Margaret did. Her voice was hoarse, almost broken. He's killed people, Lucy. The words crashed over Lucy like a tidal wave. Her breath faltered. What? Margaret swallowed hard. James, he's not just some businessman. He's a part of something bigger. And once you're in, you don't get out. Lucy felt dizzy. Her mother had known. She had known, and she had kept it secret. How long? Lucy whispered. How long have you known? Her mother closed her eyes. Years. Lucy took a staggering step backward. Her own mother had protected a murderer. Lucy's father turned away, his jaw tight. We're going to the police. I don't care what happens. Margaret's eyes were wild. Dave, you don't understand. He has people everywhere. If we go to the police, we'll be dead by morning. Her father grabbed her by the shoulders. Then we don't wait until morning. Margaret sucked in a breath. Lucy looked between them, her entire world crashing down around her. Her uncle was a killer. Her mother had helped cover it up. Her father was ready to risk everything to expose him. And now James knew that Lucy was a threat. Her stomach twisted. She had wanted the truth. But now, the truth might get them all killed. A deal with the devil. The Westbrook house was no longer a home. It was a war zone. After James had left, the silence in the house had turned suffocating. The storm outside raged on, rain hammering against the windows, as if the sky itself knew what was coming. Lucy sat at the dining table, her hands clenched into fists, her mind racing. Her uncle was a killer. Her mother had helped him. And now, their entire family was in danger. Her father had spent the last hour on the phone, his voice hushed and tense, speaking in clipped phrases Lucy couldn't quite catch. Her mother sat across from her, unmoving, like a statue frozen in guilt. Lucy had never seen her like this before, so small, so lost. The woman who had always been so strong, so in control, now looked defeated. Lucy wanted to scream, to demand answers, to demand why her mother had lied to her for so long. But the words stuck in her throat. Her father finally ended the call and turned to them, his expression grave. "I spoke to someone I trust at the precinct." Lucy perked up. "And they're willing to listen," he said. "But we have to be careful. If James finds out we're going to the police—" Margaret cut him off. "He already knows." Her father's face darkened. "Then we don't have time." Lucy exhaled shakily. "So, what do we do?" Her father's gaze hardened. "We leave." Lucy's stomach flipped. "What?" "We can't stay here," he said. "James has people watching us. The longer we wait, the more danger we're in." Her mother swallowed hard. "Where would we go?" "My friend at the precinct said they can put us in protective custody," her father replied. "We go there. Tonight." Lucy's hands tightened on the edge of the table. Leave? Just like that? Her mind whirled. This was her home, her school, her entire life. And now, because of James, they had to run. But then she thought of the look in her uncle's eyes, and suddenly, the idea of leaving didn't seem so bad. Her father stood. "Pack a bag. Only what you need. We leave in 15 minutes. Her mother hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Lucy pushed herself up from the chair, her legs weak beneath her. She didn't even know what to take. How do you pack when your entire life has just fallen apart? She made her way up the stairs, her hands shaking as she shoved clothes into a backpack. Jeans, shirts, her phone charger. Her eyes landed on the framed photo on her nightstand. Her parents, her uncle, and her at a family barbecue last summer. They all looked happy, like a normal family. But it had all been a lie. Lucy grabbed the frame and turned it face down. Then she heard it. A car. Her pulse spiked. The low rumble of an engine idling in their driveway. Someone was outside. She rushed to the window, pushing the curtain aside just an inch. Her breath hitched. A sleek black sedan was parked in front of the house. The headlights cut through the rain, illuminating the driveway. The driver's side door opened, and a man stepped out. Lucy's blood turned to ice. It wasn't James. It was someone else. Someone she didn't recognize. He was tall, dressed in a black suit. His posture was too relaxed, too casual. But something about him made Lucy's stomach twist. He walked toward the front door. Lucy spun on her heels. "Dad," she called, running down the stairs. Her father was already by the door, peering through the peephole. His body was tense. Lucy could see his hand hovering near the hall drawer, the one where he kept his gun. A knock echoed through the house. Her father took a breath before unlocking the door, keeping it open just a crack. The man smiled. "David Westbrook," he said smoothly. His voice was calm. Too calm. "We should talk." Lucy's father didn't move. "Who are you?" The man tilted his head. "A friend." Her father didn't look convinced. "I don't have any friends like you." The man chuckled. "Fair enough." He reached into his coat pocket slowly, as if to show he wasn't reaching for a weapon. Her father tensed. But the man simply pulled out a small white envelope and handed it over. Her father took it, his eyes flicking to the man's face. "What is this?" "A message," the man said, his smile never faltering. "From James." Lucy felt sick. Her father opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper, a handwritten note. Lucy watched as her father's eyes scanned the words, then widened. His face went pale. He clenched his jaw. And then he ripped the paper into shreds. The man chuckled. "Now, Dave, that's no way to respond to an opportunity." "Get off my property," her father growled. The man sighed. "You should reconsider." Her father slammed the door shut, locked it. Then he turned to them, his chest rising and falling rapidly. Lucy had never seen him like this. "What did it say?" Margaret whispered. Her father looked at her, then at Lucy. His face was grim. "He wants to make a deal. The choice. Lucy's heart pounded. A deal? Her father's hands curled into fists. He wants us to drop everything, to forget about the police. Margaret sucked in a breath. Lucy's stomach churned. And if we don't? Her father hesitated. Then his voice came out cold. He'll kill us. Silence. Lucy's hands trembled. This was real. This wasn't just some family drama. It wasn't just about lies and secrets anymore. James had threatened their lives. Her mother's face crumpled. Oh, God. Her father took a deep breath, then turned to them. We're leaving. Now. Lucy didn't argue. She ran upstairs, grabbing her backpack. By the time she came back down, her father was already by the front door, his eyes scanning the windows. Her mother was standing in the hallway, her arms wrapped around herself. Then, the lights went out. Pitch black. Lucy froze. The storm outside raged louder. The wind howled through the trees. And the house, the entire house, plunged into darkness. Then a phone rang. The sound sliced through the silence like a knife. Lucy's father reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone and stared at the screen. Lucy watched as his Adam's apple bobbed. Then he answered. James. Lucy's stomach dropped. She could hear the voice on the other end. Calm. Collected. Amused. Going somewhere, Dave? Lucy's father gritted his teeth. I told you to stay away from my family. James laughed softly. Oh, brother. I think we both know that's not an option anymore. Lucy's breath was shallow. James continued, his voice casual. Too casual. You think you're making the right choice, but let me ask you something. How far are you willing to go? Her father didn't answer. James sighed. You see, I don't like loose ends, Dave. And right now, you, Margaret, Lucy, you're a loose end. Lucy's pulse pounded in her ears. James chuckled. So here's the deal. You walk away. Forget everything. And I let you live. Her father's grip tightened on the phone. Or, he asked. There was a pause. Then James's voice came through, smooth as velvet. Or I bury you. Lucy's world stopped. Her father inhaled sharply. Then he did something Lucy didn't expect. He smiled. Then he said, in a voice filled with steel, You're going to have to try harder than that, James. And with that he hung up. Lucy's heart pounded. Her father turned to them. Let's go. And with that, the Westbrooks ran into the night. The hunt begins. The night swallowed them whole. Rain pelted down in sheets as Lucy, her parents, and the storm itself seemed to be running from the same thing. James Westbrook. Her father's car peeled out of the driveway, tires screeching against wet pavement. Lucy sat in the back seat, her fists clenched around her backpack, her pulse pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Her mother stared straight ahead, her breathing shallow, her hands gripping the dashboard so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her father. His face was a mask of pure focus. No one spoke. No one had to, because they all knew one thing. James was coming. Lucy swallowed hard and turned to look out the back window. The house that had once been her home was now a shadow in the distance. And just beyond it, headlights, a sleek black sedan, the same car from earlier. Lucy's breath hitched. Oh my God, she whispered. They're following us. Her father's jaw tightened. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Then, without a word, he floored it. The chase. The car lunged forward, the tires spinning against the wet road. Lucy gripped the seat in front of her. Her mother gasped. David. They're not just following us, her father interrupted, his voice razor sharp. They're hunting us. Lucy looked back. The black sedan was gaining speed. Her heartbeat slammed against her ribs. They were on an empty stretch of road now, the streetlights flickering in the storm. The rain blurred everything, turning the world into streaks of silver and black. Her father swerved sharply onto a side street. The sedan followed. Lucy's stomach twisted. They were being herded. "Dad," she whispered, "where are we going?" Her father didn't answer. His grip on the wheel tightened as he took another sharp turn, narrowly missing a collision with a parked truck. The tires skidded. The car fishtailed before straightening. Lucy looked back again. The sedan wasn't slowing down. It was gaining. A sudden, horrible thought hit Lucy all at once. They weren't going to let them get away. "Mom," Lucy said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother turned toward her, her face pale. "I don't think they're trying to chase us." Lucy swallowed hard. Her mother frowned. "What?" Lucy turned back to the window. "They're trying to run us off the road." As if to prove her point, the black sedan suddenly surged forward and slammed into their back bumper. The impact sent the car lurching forward. Lucy's head slammed against the window. Her mother screamed. Her father cursed. The car swerved violently. The sedan rammed them again. Harder. Lucy felt the wheels skid. The whole world tilted. For one terrifying second, she thought they were going to flip. Her father fought for control, twisting the wheel violently. The car fishtailed, hydroplaning across the slick road. "Hold on," he shouted. Lucy did. She gripped the seat so hard her nails dug into the fabric. Then, her father did something crazy. Instead of trying to outrun them, he slammed the brakes. Hard. The sudden stop sent the sedan shooting past them. They spun out, narrowly missing the curb. Lucy's breath hitched. Her father wasted no time. He threw the car into reverse, whipping it into a tight turn. Then, he floored it in the opposite direction. Lucy barely had time to process what had happened before she saw something through the rain. More headlights. And not just one car. 3. All parked at the intersection up ahead. Waiting. Her father saw them too. And for the first time, Lucy saw fear flash across his face. "Oh no," he muttered. Her mother gasped. "They cut us off." Lucy felt her blood turn to ice. They weren't just being chased. They were being trapped. The standoff. Her father hit the brakes, stopping the car just a few yards away from the waiting vehicles. The rain pounded against the windshield, making the scene look even more surreal. The 3 black sedans idled like predators waiting for the kill. Then, their doors opened. Men stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark suits. Their faces were partially obscured by the rain, but Lucy could see the tearful bulge of weapons beneath their coats. Her stomach twisted. One of them stepped forward. James. Even through the rain, Lucy could see him smiling. Her father's grip tightened on the wheel. Her mother whispered, "David, what do we do?" He didn't answer. James took another step forward, then raised his hands, like he was inviting them to a conversation. Lucy's father exhaled sharply. Then, with deliberate slowness, he unlocked the doors. Lucy's breath caught. "Dad?" Her father turned to her, his face grim. "We don't have a choice, Lou. If we run, they'll just catch us." Lucy swallowed hard. Her father opened his door. Then, so did James. Lucy could barely breathe. Her father stepped into the rain, his expression hard, unyielding. James met him halfway, standing just outside the glow of the headlights. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, James chuckled. "You know what," he said, shaking his head. "I really thought you were smarter than this, Dave." Lucy's father didn't flinch. "Stay away from my family." James sighed. "Come on now. Is that any way to greet your big brother?" Her father's hands curled into fists. James smiled. "You made this a lot harder than it needed to be. I gave you a way out, Dave. I offered you a deal. But no, you had to go and make it personal." Her father's jaw tightened. "You threatened my daughter." James smirked. "And what do you think's going to happen now?" Her father didn't respond. James took a slow step forward. "You don't get it, do you? You think you're the hero here. Some nobleman trying to protect his family." He laughed softly. "Dave, you've already lost." Lucy's father didn't move. James's eyes flicked toward the car, toward Lucy. Her blood ran cold. His smile widened. "There she is," he murmured. Lucy's grip on the seat tightened. Her father moved instantly, blocking James's line of sight. "Don't," he growled. James raised his hands in mock surrender. "Relax. Just saying hello." His smile faded. Then he leaned in slightly. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You know this doesn't end well for you, right?" Lucy watched her father's shoulders tighten. James's smirk returned. "You've got two choices," he continued. "You take your family, and you disappear. No cops. No drama. You walk away." Lucy's father's voice was low, dangerous. "And the second choice." James's smile turned razor-sharp. "You die." Lucy's breath caught. Her father didn't move. James sighed, shaking his head. "I'll give you some time to think about it, but not much." He patted her father on the shoulder. "Clock's ticking, little brother." Then, just like that, he turned and walked back to his car. The rest of the men followed. The black sit-ins revved their engines. And then, they were gone. The road was empty again. Her father stood there for a long moment, staring into the rain. Lucy couldn't breathe. Then, slowly, he turned, and Lucy saw something in his eyes. Not fear, not anger, determination. He got back into the car. His voice was steady. "We end this." Lucy's heart pounded. She looked at her mother. She looked at her father. And then she nodded, because she knew. This wasn't just about running anymore. This was about fighting back. And the Westbrooks weren't going down without a fight. The final move. The storm raged on, but the Westbrooks weren't running anymore. Lucy's father gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his jaw set like stone. The car sat idling at the side of the road, hidden in the shadow of an old, abandoned gas station. The rain poured down in torrents, hammering the roof like the ticking of a countdown clock. Lucy sat in the back seat, heart thudding against her ribs. Her mother was next to her, arms wrapped around herself, lips pressed together, so tightly they had turned pale. No one spoke. The weight of James's final words still hung in the air. "Clock's ticking, little brother." Her father exhaled sharply. "We're not running," he said finally. Lucy swallowed hard. "Then what are we doing?" He turned to face them, eyes dark and determined. "We're ending this." Margaret shook her head. "David, we can't just." "Margaret." He cut her off. "We don't have a choice anymore. You saw what happened back there. He isn't going to stop. He'll keep coming until we're gone. Or worse." Her mother clenched her jaw. "And what? You want to take him down yourself?" "He's not just one man, David. He has people everywhere." Her father didn't waver, which is exactly why we need to act now, before he realizes we're not running. Lucy's mind was racing. This was insane. Her father wanted to fight back. Against James. Against his entire criminal network. "How?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her father's gaze locked onto hers. "We go to the police." Lucy's mother froze. "No," she said immediately. Lucy frowned. "Mom, we can't just do nothing." Her mother turned to her green eyes flashing with something close to panic. "You don't understand. James has connections. The police won't protect us. They'll take our statement, put us in some flimsy protective custody. And then, one by one, we'll disappear." Her voice cracked. "He'll find a way." Lucy's stomach twisted. "So what do we do? Just wait for him to kill us?" "No," her father said. "We force his hand." Her mother frowned. "David." He turned to Lucy. "How much information did you find in my office?" Lucy hesitated. "A lot." She swallowed. "Bank statements, contracts, photos, the financial trail linking James to everything." Her father nodded. "That's what we need." Her mother's expression turned to alarm. "David, no. We leak it. He interrupted. All of it. Lucy's breath caught. What? Her father's eyes gleamed. We take away his power. We put it all out in the open. His accounts, his deals, the people he's working with. If we make it public, he won't be able to silence us without silencing himself. Her mother was shaking her head. Do you have any idea what you're saying? If you go against him like this, he'll have you killed, David. Not if we do it right, he said. Not if we take away his ability to control the narrative. Lucy was still trying to process. How? Where would we even put that kind of information? Her father exhaled. We go to someone who can spread it fast. Journalists. Online sources. We don't go through just one person. We send it everywhere. Once it's out, there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle. Margaret closed her eyes. This is suicide. Lucy's father turned to her. If we don't do this, we're dead anyway. Silence. Lucy's stomach was a knot of fear, but she knew he was right. James wasn't bluffing. He had made it clear. They either disappeared or they died. And Lucy wasn't about to let him win. She lifted her chin. What do we do? Her father gave her a grim smile. We hit him where it hurts. The upload. 30 minutes later, they were holed up in a cheap roadside motel. The small room smelled like mildew, and the flickering neon sign outside the window cast an eerie red glow across the floor. Lucy sat at the desk, her laptop open, uploading the files. Her father stood behind her, scanning the documents on the screen. Every folder, every image, every bank statement. This is it, he muttered. Her mother was pacing behind them. David, I still don't think. It's too late, he said. We're doing this. Lucy's fingers hovered over the final button. Upload. Her heart raced. One click. That was all it would take. One click to burn James's empire to the ground. One click to paint a target on their backs. She took a deep breath, then pressed it. The files vanished into the internet. Gone. Out of their hands. Her father nodded. It's done. Lucy exhaled. Then, her mother's phone buzzed. She froze. Her father turned to her. Who is it? Margaret's fingers were shaking as she reached for her phone. She flipped it over. The color drained from her face. Lucy's stomach clenched. Mom. Her mother's lips parted. Then she turned the screen toward them. A text message. From James. Too late, little brother. I'm already here. The break-in. A crash came from the motel door. Lucy screamed. Her father lunged forward, locking the door just as it burst inward. The flimsy lock held. Barely. Boom. Another hit. The door shook on its hinges. Her father spun toward them. Out the window. Now. Lucy scrambled toward the back window, throwing it open. Rain poured in, soaking the motel floor. Her mother hesitated. David. Go, Margaret. She grabbed Lucy's hand, pulling her toward the opening. Boom. The door cracked. Lucy's father turned, gun in hand. Go, he shouted. Lucy's mother shoved her through the window first. She landed hard on the wet pavement outside, her hands scraping against the rough concrete. Then, her mother climbed through. The moment her feet hit the ground, the motel door shattered. Gunfire exploded inside. Lucy's mother screamed. Lucy whirled around. Dad. Then, her father came flying through the window after them, landing hard on his side. Lucy gasped. Dad, are you okay? He groaned, pushing himself up. Keep running. But Lucy hesitated, because in the darkness of the motel room, she saw them. James's men. One of them stepped into the doorway. Lucy barely had time to process before he raised his gun. He aimed. He fired. A split second before the bullet could hit them, a new gunshot rang out. The man dropped. Lucy spun, and there, standing in the rain, was a group of uniformed officers, weapons drawn. The police. A voice boomed through the storm. Freeze. Hands. In the air. Lucy's heart stopped. James's men hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, the police swarmed. Lucy barely had time to breathe before officers tackled the armed men, taking them down in seconds. Then, a voice she recognized. David. Lucy's father turned. And there, stepping out from behind a police car, was Detective Harris. Her father exhaled, staggering forward. Harris. The detective nodded. We got the files. Lucy's breath caught. That meant James's empire. It was over. The fall of James Westbrook. In the end, it happened fast. James was arrested within hours. The files were everywhere. News stations, government agencies, financial regulators. Everything he had built. Gone. And as Lucy sat in the back of an ambulance, watching the wreckage of her family's war, she realized something. She had thought the truth would break them. But it hadn't. It had set them free. Her father sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You did good, kid. Lucy exhaled. For the first time in weeks, she believed him. Because James Westbrook was finished. And the Westbrooks. They had survived.